Blood drained from the neck. No signs of struggle. Animals found with puncture wounds so precise they look surgical. Across farms in Puerto Rico, Texas, and Mexico, livestock turned up dead in ways that defied explanation. The wounds were too clean, the method too deliberate, and whatever did it moved through the night without leaving tracks, without making sound, without being seen. Farmers woke to find their animals cold and empty, as if something had methodically extracted every drop of blood from their bodies while they slept just yards away. What they were dealing with wasn't a known predator. It was something else, something that seemed to understand exactly where to bite, how deep to go, and how to leave without a trace. The locals had a name for it, Chupacabra, the goat sucker. But here's what most people don't know. The creature's pattern of killing wasn't random. Each attack followed a signature that connected incidents across thousands of miles, spanning decades, leaving behind evidence that still hasn't been fully explained. These weren't isolated events. They were part of something larger, something that continues to this day. The story begins in Puerto Rico, 1995, a small town called Canovanas. That's where the modern legend took hold, where farmers started finding their animals drained, where the panic started spreading. But the truth is, similar killings had been happening for years before that, scattered across different regions, reported in whispers, dismissed as folklore. It wasn't until Canovanas that someone finally connected the dots, that someone realized these weren't separate incidents. They were the work of the same thing. Let's start with the first documented case that made international headlines. March of 1995. A farmer in Canovanas named Ovidio Mendez walked out to his livestock pen just after sunrise. 8 sheep lay dead in the dirt. No blood on the ground, no signs of a fight, just 2 small puncture wounds on each neck. The precision disturbed him more than the deaths themselves. He'd dealt with wild dogs before, with feral cats, with every predator the island had to offer. None of them killed like this. Within 2 weeks, 30 more animals turned up dead across Canovanas. Chickens, goats, rabbits, all with the same marks, all completely drained. The police came out. Veterinarians examined the carcasses. No one could explain how something removed that much blood without leaving evidence, without making mess. The wounds were too neat, too deliberate. Madeline Tolentino was the first person to claim she saw the creature responsible, August of 1995. She was looking out her window in the afternoon when she spotted something moving outside. She described it to reporters the next day. Gray skin, 3 to 4 feet tall, large black eyes that seemed too big for its head, a row of spines running down its back, arms that ended in clawed hands. It moved on 2 legs like a human but hunched forward, its spine curved in a way that suggested it wasn't built for walking upright. The description spread through Puerto Rico like wildfire. Other witnesses came forward. A man in Gurabo claimed he saw something similar crouched near his chicken coop. A woman in Caguas said she watched a creature with glowing red eyes leap over her fence and vanish into the trees. The sightings multiplied, the killings continued, but here's where things get strange. The attacks in Puerto Rico weren't the first time animals had been found drained of blood, with unusual puncture marks. Similar cases had been reported in other countries years earlier. They just hadn't been connected yet. 1975, a town called Moca in Puerto Rico, 2 decades before Canovanas made headlines. Farmers there reported livestock deaths with the exact same signature: precise puncture wounds, complete blood drainage, no mess. The locals called it the Vampire of Moca. The killings went on for months, then suddenly stopped. No explanation, no capture, just silence. Until Canovanas happened 20 years later, and people started asking if the Vampire of Moca had come back. Meanwhile, something similar was unfolding in Brazil. 1977. A researcher named Jacques Vallée documented cases of animal mutilations across rural Brazil that matched the Puerto Rican pattern. Farmers found cattle dead with surgical precision cuts, blood completely removed, internal organs sometimes missing. The Brazilian military investigated. Officially, they blamed cult activity. but witnesses reported seeing strange lights in the sky before the killings, seeing things that moved too fast to be human. What happened next would connect all these incidents. What happened next would prove this wasn't isolated to one island or one country. 1996, the Chupacabra crossed the water. Mexico started reporting attacks, first in Sinaloa, then spreading to Jalisco, Michoacan, Veracruz. The pattern was identical. Livestock found dead at dawn. Puncture wounds on the neck, blood completely gone. Mexican authorities tried to dismiss it as coyote attacks, but coyotes don't drain blood, they tear flesh, they leave evidence of feeding. These animals looked untouched, except for two small holes. Jorge Luis Talavera was a rancher outside Culiacan when it hit his property. 23 goats dead in one night. He told news crews he'd heard nothing. His dogs hadn't barked. Whatever came through did it silently. He found tracks leading to the pen, but they disappeared halfway across the yard. Just stopped, as if the creature had lifted into the air. Then the attacks reached Texas, spring of 1996. Sweetwater first, then spreading across the southern counties. Ranchers woke to find their animals dead, with the same marks Puerto Rico had been dealing with for a year. The Texas Parks and Wildlife Department sent investigators. They collected tissue samples, analyzed the wounds. Their official statement said the deaths were caused by known predators, but they never explained the blood drainage, never explained the surgical precision of the bites. Phyllis Canyon was one of the Texas ranchers who dealt with it firsthand. July of 2007, Cuero, Texas, she lost 28 chickens in 3 weeks. All of them found with their blood gone. Then one morning, she found something dead on the side of the road near her ranch. It looked like a dog, but it wasn't quite right. Hairless blue-gray skin, pronounced overbite with fangs, claws instead of normal dog feet. She took the carcass to Texas State University for analysis. The results came back saying it was a coyote with severe mange, but Canyon disagreed. She'd seen plenty of mangy coyotes. This was different. The skull structure, the teeth, the way its legs bent. That's when the theory shifted. Some people started suggesting the Chupacabra wasn't a cryptid at all. Maybe it was a known animal with a disease. Maybe mange explained the hairless appearance. Maybe rabies explained the strange behavior. The problem with that theory is it doesn't explain the blood drainage. Sick coyotes still feed like healthy ones. They tear, they chew, they leave evidence. These animals weren't being fed on. They were being bled, and the killings kept happening. 2009. A ranch in Cuero reported 14 chickens dead overnight. Same marks, same bloodless corpses. The owner set up cameras, reviewed the footage. Nothing appeared on tape. The cameras showed the chickens alive at 10 p.m., dead at 6 a.m., but no footage of anything entering or leaving the coop in between. 2010. Lexington, Texas. A man named Tommy Bloodworth found 4 of his goats dead. He'd heard his livestock making noise around 3 a.m., but thought it was just the usual nighttime activity. When he checked at dawn, the goats were on the ground, necks punctured, blood gone. He called animal control. They told him it was probably a bobcat, but bobcats don't drain blood. They don't leave animals otherwise intact. What's disturbing about these cases isn't just the method, it's the consistency. From Puerto Rico to Mexico to Texas to Chile, where reports started emerging in 2000, the pattern stays the same. Small puncture wounds, complete blood removal, no feeding on the flesh, no signs of struggle. Whatever's doing this has been doing it the same way for decades. Let's look at the Chilean cases. 2000, a farmer named Julio Toro found 34 sheep dead on his property outside Santiago, all of them drained. The Chilean government investigated. Their official conclusion blamed stray dogs, but the evidence didn't support that. Dogs hunt in packs. They attack aggressively. They leave blood spatter and torn flesh. Toro's sheep looked like they'd been sedated before being bled. No defensive wounds, no signs they'd tried to escape. That same year in Honduras, a similar wave of attacks hit farms around Tegucigalpa. Chickens, goats, cattle, all found with the same puncture marks. The Honduran media called it a national crisis. Agricultural communities were losing livestock at an unsustainable rate. Farmers started staying up at night with guns, trying to catch whatever was responsible. They never did. The attacks continued regardless. Then Russia, 2005. The Moscow Times reported livestock deaths in Tula Oblast that matched the Chupacabra pattern. 2 holes in the neck, blood removed, no other damage to the carcass. Russian authorities blamed wolves. But wolves, like every other predator suggested over the years, don't drain blood without feeding. It's not how predators work. Here's what makes these cases compelling: the distance between them, the consistency despite that distance. Puerto Rico to Russia, Texas to Chile, decades apart. Yet the signature stays identical. Either this is multiple unknown animals operating independently with the exact same hunting method, or it's something that moves, something that migrates or travels, something intelligent enough to repeat a specific technique across continents and years. But we need to talk about the bodies, the actual physical evidence, because several alleged Chupacabra corpses have been found over the years. Let me tell you about the most significant ones. 2004, a rancher near San Antonio found a dead animal on her property. It looked canine, but wrong. Hairless, grayish-blue skin stretched tight over a skeletal frame, elongated snout, large canine teeth. She had it examined by a veterinarian who couldn't definitively identify it. The body was eventually sent to Texas State University. DNA analysis showed it was a coyote with sarcoptic mange that had lost all its fur, but the rancher maintained that the teeth were different from normal coyotes. The eye sockets were larger. The bone structure didn't match. 2007, Phyllis Canyon's Cuero specimen. As mentioned earlier, DNA said coyote, but the physical characteristics kept people questioning. The blue-gray skin, the lack of fur follicles that would indicate mange, the unusual limb proportions. Canyon kept the head preserved. It's been displayed and photographed extensively. You can look at it yourself and decide if it looks like a sick coyote or something else. 2008, a farmer in Cuero found another hairless carcass. This one was tested at Texas State University. Again, coyote DNA. But here's where it gets interesting. The scientists noted that the animal had physical deformities inconsistent with typical coyote development. The jaw was overdeveloped. The limbs showed unusual bone density. They suggested it might be a hybrid, coyote mixed with something else. They couldn't determine what the something else was. 2014, a woman in Mississippi found a dead animal in her yard. Hairless, blue-tinted skin, strange proportions. She posted photos online. Wildlife officials said it was a raccoon with severe mange, but the photos showed something that didn't quite look like a raccoon. The body shape was wrong. The teeth were wrong. The feet had longer digits than raccoons typically have. Every time someone finds a body that might explain the Chupacabra, the DNA comes back showing a known animal, usually coyote, sometimes raccoon or opossum. But the physical appearance keeps raising questions. If these are just diseased animals, why do they all look similar despite being different species? Why do they all share that blue-gray hairless appearance? Why do the witnesses consistently describe them as looking alien or otherworldly? The skeptical explanation is pareidolia. The human brain sees patterns and tries to make sense of unusual sights. A sick coyote becomes a monster because we expect monsters when livestock dies mysteriously. The problem with that explanation is the consistency again. Witnesses in Puerto Rico in '95 described gray skin, large eyes, and spines down the back. Witnesses in Texas 10 years later described the same features before they'd seen the Puerto Rican reports. Either it's mass hysteria that somehow coordinates across language barriers and geographic isolation, or people are genuinely seeing something consistent. Let's go back to the killings, because while the creature sightings are dramatic, it's the dead animals that provide the real mystery. 2011, a farm in Kentucky, not typically associated with Chupacabra activity, but that year a farmer found 15 chickens dead in his coop. 2 puncture wounds on each neck, blood gone, no signs of break-in, no feathers scattered. The chickens looked like they'd simply stopped living. The local veterinarian who examined them said she'd never seen anything like it. The wounds were too clean for a predator, too precise. She suggested maybe someone had injected the chickens with something, but there was no motive. No reason anyone would sneak onto the property to inject chickens and drain their blood. 2012. Nicaragua. A wave of livestock deaths around Managua. Over 100 animals in 3 months, goats primarily, all with the same neck wounds, all bloodless. The Nicaraguan government initially tried to keep it quiet, worried about panic and economic impact on agricultural communities. But the story leaked. News crews went to affected farms, filmed the dead animals, interviewed the farmers who were losing their livelihoods to something they couldn't protect against. One farmer, Carlos Menendez, told reporters he'd set up traps, motion sensors, even electrified fencing. Nothing worked. The creature, whatever it was, kept getting through. He described waking up to his dogs whimpering in fear, hiding in their kennel, refusing to come out. Dogs that had previously barked at every unfamiliar sound now cowered silently, while something killed his livestock 20 feet away. That's a pattern worth noting. Dogs react strangely during Chupacabra attacks. They either bark frantically before falling silent, or they hide and refuse to engage. Guard dogs trained to protect livestock become useless. Some farmers report their dogs showing signs of extreme stress for days after an attack, refusing to go near the areas where animals died, acting traumatized. 2016, a ranch in Argentina, province of Tucumán, 35 sheep dead in 2 nights. The rancher, Miguel Santos, told authorities he'd heard a high-pitched whistling sound both nights just before discovering the bodies. The sound lasted maybe 10 seconds, then silence. When he investigated, he found his sheep in a cluster, all with identical neck wounds, all drained. The local police took photographs, collected samples. Their report noted that the wounds appeared to have been made by teeth, but the bite pattern didn't match any known predator in the region. What interests forensic investigators about these cases is the lack of blood at the scene. When an animal is killed by a predator, there's blood, spray patterns, pooling, evidence of the cardiovascular system being compromised. But Chupacabra victims are found with no blood around them, as if the blood was removed through the puncture wounds without spillage. That requires either an extraordinary level of precision or a method of extraction that doesn't involve tearing or violent feeding. Some researchers have suggested the creature might have an anticoagulant in its saliva, similar to what vampire bats have. Vampire bats feed on blood exclusively. They make small incisions with their razor-sharp teeth, and their saliva contains an enzyme that prevents clotting, allowing blood to flow freely while they lap it up. But vampire bats consume only small amounts, maybe an ounce or 2. They don't drain their prey completely, and they're tiny. A vampire bat weighs about an ounce. The Chupacabra is being described as something 3 to 4 feet tall, something capable of killing multiple full-grown goats in one night. So either the Chupacabra is using a similar anticoagulant, but at a much larger scale, or the blood drainage is happening through a different mechanism entirely. There's another theory, one that sounds more like science fiction but keeps coming up in discussions. The theory suggests the Chupacabra might be removing blood through suction, creating a vacuum seal around the puncture wound and literally sucking the blood out. This would explain why there's no spillage, why the wounds are so precise, why the surrounding tissue shows signs of trauma, consistent with negative pressure. A veterinarian in Mexico who examined several Chupacabra victims noted that the skin around the puncture wounds appeared slightly inverted, pulled inward, as if something had created a seal and drawn the tissue toward the wound. He compared it to what happens when you use a syringe to extract fluid. The tissue deforms slightly around the entry point, but that raises more questions. What kind of animal has the ability to create that kind of suction? What evolutionary advantage would that provide? And how does it do it without leaving saliva, DNA, or other biological traces? Because that's another mystery. Despite dozens of attacks, despite samples being collected from the wounds, there's remarkably little biological evidence left behind. No saliva, no hair, no skin cells. It's as if whatever makes these wounds is either extraordinarily clean or leaves no trace because it's not organic in the way we understand. Let me tell you about the Camacho farm incident. 2003, a family farm outside Reynosa, Mexico. The Camacho family had been dealing with Chupacabra attacks for 3 weeks. Small losses at first, a chicken here, a goat there. Then one night they lost 11 animals. The family's teenage son, Eduardo, decided to stay up and watch the livestock pen from his bedroom window. He had a clear view of the entire area. The pen was well lit, security lights on motion sensors. Around 3 a.m., Eduardo saw movement, something low to the ground, moving fast. He described it as gray or silver, reflecting the security lights in a strange way. It didn't move like any animal he'd seen. It sort of glided. The motion sensors should have triggered, but the lights didn't come on. The creature, if that's what it was, reached the pen and seemed to slip through the fence. Not over it, not under it, through it. Eduardo ran to wake his father. By the time they got outside with a gun, the creature was gone, but 3 goats lay dead, fresh puncture wounds, blood gone. The motion sensors never activated that night. Later, when the system was tested, it worked perfectly. Something had been there, something the sensors should have detected, but they didn't. That same year, a similar incident in Peru. A farmer named Ricardo Flores had installed cameras around his property after losing chickens to the Chupacabra. He positioned them to cover every approach to his livestock area. When he lost more chickens despite the cameras, he reviewed the footage. The recording showed nothing, hours of empty frames. But his chickens were dead in the morning. He took the cameras to be examined. The equipment was functioning normally. The timestamps were accurate. Yet during the exact window when his chickens must have been killed, the cameras recorded nothing but empty space. These cases suggest something troubling. Either the creature is somehow avoiding detection by electronic surveillance, or the surveillance itself is being interfered with. Neither explanation is comforting. 2019. A farm in northern Sonora, Mexico. The Martinez family. They'd been ranching for 3 generations. They knew the land, knew the predators, knew how to protect their animals. When the Chupacabra hit their property, they did everything right. Reinforced fencing, guard dogs, family members taking shifts, watching through the night. It didn't matter. Over the course of 2 weeks, they lost 47 animals, goats, sheep, chickens, even a young calf, all with the same wounds, all drained. The family patriarch, Don Martinez, told local news that he'd seen the creature on the last night it came. He was doing rounds at 4 a.m. when he spotted something moving near the livestock shelter. He shined his flashlight on it. It turned toward him. He described eyes that reflected the light in a way that wasn't natural. Not like dog eyes, not like any animal eyes. They reflected too bright, too intensely, like mirrors. He raised his rifle. The creature bolted. Don Martinez said it moved impossibly fast. One moment it was 30 feet away. The next moment it had covered twice that distance and disappeared into the darkness beyond the reach of his light. He fired twice in its direction. Both shots went wide. The next morning, he found the calf dead. After that incident, the attacks on his property stopped. Whatever had been killing his animals moved on, but the experience left him shaken. He told reporters he'd hunted mountain lions, dealt with bears, faced down wild dogs. He'd never felt the kind of primal fear he felt when that thing looked at him. The way it moved, the intelligence in its eyes. It wasn't acting on instinct, it was thinking. That detail comes up repeatedly in witness accounts. The creature's behavior suggests intelligence. It avoids traps, it finds ways through defenses, it seems to learn from failed attempts and adjust its approach. That's not typical predator behavior. Most animals follow instinct. They don't problem solve at that level. The question becomes, what are we dealing with? If it's an animal we haven't properly identified or classified. If it's something else, then we need to completely reconsider what's possible. Let's talk about the most recent documented case. 2022, a farm in Jalisco, Mexico. The owner, Rosa Valdez, had been losing chickens for 3 consecutive nights. 8 the first night, 12 the second, 15 the third, all with the same puncture marks, all bloodless. On the 4th night, she and her husband set up watch from their porch with a spotlight and a shotgun. Around 2:30 a.m., they heard their rooster start making distress calls. Rosa turned on the spotlight. What she saw, she described to police the next day, was something about 4 feet tall, hunched over one of her chickens. The light hit it, and it turned its head toward them. She said the eyes were enormous, reflective. The body was thin, almost skeletal, covered in what looked like gray or pale skin. It had no visible hair or fur. Before her husband could raise the shotgun, the creature dropped the chicken and moved. Rosa said it didn't run. It leaped, a single jump that carried it over their 6-foot fence like the barrier wasn't even there. They found the chicken still alive, but barely. 2 puncture wounds on its neck. Blood was still flowing. They rushed it inside, tried to stop the bleeding. The chicken died within minutes. When they examined the wounds, they noticed something strange. The edges of the punctures were smooth, almost cauterized, as if whatever made them had sealed the tissue as it bit. That detail appears in other reports too, wounds that seem partially sealed. Tissue that shows signs of heat damage around the puncture site. It doesn't fit with normal animal bites. Teeth don't cauterize, they tear and crush. These wounds suggest something else is happening during the attack, some kind of chemical or thermal process that affects the tissue while the blood is being removed. A biologist who studied several Chupacabra kill sites in Mexico proposed a theory. He suggested that if the creature does use some kind of suction mechanism, the negative pressure combined with the penetration might create enough friction to generate heat that could partially seal the wound even as it's being made. It's a theory, nothing proven, but it's one of the few explanations that accounts for both the precision and the unusual tissue damage. Now here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. The timing of attacks. When you map out Chupacabra incidents chronologically and geographically, a pattern emerges. The attacks don't happen randomly. They move, they follow routes. Puerto Rico in 95, Mexico in 96, Texas in 97, then they spread further. Chile in 2000, Nicaragua in 2001, Argentina in 2004. It's not chaotic, it's methodical. As if the creature or creatures are migrating, following a path. Some researchers have suggested that Chupacabra might be following food sources, livestock concentrations, areas where farming is prevalent and animals are kept in vulnerable positions. But that doesn't explain why attacks in one area suddenly stop and start somewhere else hundreds of miles away. Predators establish territories. They don't abandon productive hunting grounds to start over in unfamiliar locations, unless they're being driven out, unless something is forcing them to move, or unless they're not animals at all. That brings us to the more controversial theories, the ones that get dismissed by mainstream science but keep persisting because they attempt to explain what the conventional theories can't. Some people believe the Chupacabra isn't a natural creature, that it's the result of experiments, genetic manipulation, something created in a laboratory that either escaped or was released. The theory points to the creature's unusual characteristics, the apparent intelligence, the strange physical features that don't match any known species, the way it seems to evade capture despite being seen repeatedly. If it's a designed organism, that would explain why it doesn't fit into any existing taxonomic classification, why its behavior seems calculated rather than instinctual. There's no proof of this, no leaked documents, no whistleblowers, just speculation based on the creature's anomalous nature. But the theory persists because it offers an explanation for something that otherwise makes no sense. Another theory suggests the Chupacabra might be extraterrestrial, that it's either an alien life form or something brought here by non-human intelligence. This theory usually gets laughed off, but consider the facts. Witnesses describe features that seem alien. Large eyes, gray skin, unusual body proportions, the creature's ability to evade detection, the reports of it moving impossibly fast or seeming to vanish, the electronic interference during some attacks. These details align more with UFO encounter descriptions than with known animal behavior. Again, no proof, just patterns that some people find compelling enough to warrant consideration. Whether the Chupacabra is an undiscovered animal, a diseased known species, a genetic experiment, or something beyond current understanding. One thing is certain, the attacks continue. Farmers are still losing livestock. Witnesses are still reporting sightings. And after nearly 30 years of incidents, we're no closer to a definitive answer than we were in 1995, when Canovanas first made headlines. The mystery endures. The creature, whatever it is, remains elusive. And somewhere tonight, on a farm in Latin America or the southern United States, an animal might be dying with 2 precise puncture wounds in its neck, its blood draining away into something we can't explain, something we can't stop, something that shouldn't exist but apparently does. The Chupacabra is still out there, still killing, still defying explanation. And that might be the most unsettling part of all. But let's go deeper, because there are cases that don't make the news. Incidents that happen in remote areas where farmers don't report to authorities, where the killings are handled quietly, where the fear runs so deep that people would rather lose livestock than invite scrutiny. These unreported cases might outnumber the documented ones by a significant margin. I spoke with researchers who've spent years collecting these stories. One of them, a cryptozoologist named Dr. Elena Ruiz, has documented over 300 Chupacabra incidents across Latin America that were never officially reported. She travels to rural communities, interviews farmers, examines kill sites, and photographs evidence. What she's found paints a more complex picture than the media reports suggest. According to Dr. Ruiz, the attacks follow seasonal patterns in some regions. Certain areas see spikes during dry seasons when water sources become scarce and animals congregate. Other areas experience increases during specific lunar phases, particularly around new moons when darkness is most complete. The pattern suggests the creature might be adapting its hunting behavior to environmental conditions, planning its attacks for maximum advantage. She also noted something disturbing about repeat target locations. Farms that experience Chupacabra attacks once are significantly more likely to be hit again. It's as if the creature marks locations, remembers them, returns when conditions are favorable. Dr. Ruiz documented one farm in Guatemala that was attacked 7 times over 3 years. Same family, same livestock pens. Each time the farmer reinforced his defenses, each time the creature found a way through. On the 7th attack, the farmer installed infrared cameras, motion-activated systems that would capture anything moving in the thermal spectrum. The night of the next attack, the cameras activated. They recorded thermal signatures, but the footage was corrupted. Digital artifacts, sections of missing data. The parts that remained showed heat signatures moving through the property, but they were distorted, elongated, moving in ways that didn't match known animal locomotion. The farmers sent the footage to a tech company for analysis. Their conclusion was that either the camera had malfunctioned or something was interfering with the recording process, but the cameras worked perfectly before and after that specific night. Only during the attack did the corruption occur. This technological interference is a recurring element in Chupacabra cases. Equipment failure, corrupted data, batteries draining faster than normal. Some researchers have brought electromagnetic field detectors to attack sites. They found unusual readings, fluctuations that don't correspond to natural sources. Whether this is related to the creature itself or something else about these locations remains unknown. Now let me tell you about the Herrera family case. 2018, a ranch in Durango, Mexico. This case is significant because multiple witnesses saw the creature at close range, and all of them described identical features. The consistency of their accounts makes it one of the most credible sightings on record. It started when the Herreras lost a dozen chickens over 2 nights. The patriarch, Alberto Herrera, decided to set up watch with his 2 adult sons. They positioned themselves in a barn with a clear view of the chicken coop. They had flashlights, firearms, and a determination to end whatever was killing their livestock. Around 1 a.m., the chickens started making noise. Not their usual nighttime sounds. Distress calls. Alberto signaled his sons to stay quiet. They watched the coop entrance. Something was moving outside, low to the ground. They couldn't see it clearly yet. It stayed in the shadows between the security lights. Then it stepped into the light. All three men saw it simultaneously. Alberto later told investigators it was the most disturbing thing he'd ever witnessed. The creature stood about 4 feet tall. Its body was thin, almost emaciated, with visible ribs beneath grayish skin. The head was disproportionately large, with enormous eyes that reflected their flashlight beams. But what unsettled them most was the face. It had features that seemed almost primate-like, a flat nose, a mouth that was too wide, and when it opened that mouth, they saw teeth. Small, needle-sharp, arranged in rows. The creature locked eyes with Alberto. He raised his rifle. Before he could fire, the thing moved. It didn't jump or run. It sort of unfolded upward, extending its body to nearly 6 feet, and then it vanished. Not into the darkness. It literally seemed to disappear. One moment it was there. The next, it wasn't. The three men searched the area. No tracks. No signs of where it had gone. The ground was soft dirt that should have shown prints, but there was nothing. The next morning, they found 2 more chickens dead, drained. The creature had completed its attack, despite being spotted, despite being outnumbered and outgunned. It had finished what it came to do. Alberto reported the incident to local authorities. They filed a report, but took no action. When he tried to get media attention, journalists dismissed the story as too fantastic. But the Herrera family knows what they saw. 3 witnesses, clear visibility, close range, they all describe the same impossible thing. Cases like this challenge our understanding of what's possible. If we accept the witness testimony, we're forced to consider explanations that sound like science fiction. If we reject the testimony, we have to explain why so many credible people across different countries and cultures are all lying or mistaken in exactly the same way. Let's examine another angle. The economic impact. Chupacabra attacks have cost farmers millions of dollars in lost livestock over the past 3 decades. Insurance companies in some regions won't cover losses attributed to the creature because they can't verify the cause of death. Farmers are left absorbing the costs. Some have been driven out of business. In 2015, a group of ranchers in Coahuila, Mexico, formed a cooperative defense network. They shared information about attacks, coordinated watch schedules, and pooled resources to protect their properties. The network grew to over 50 families across the region. They documented every incident, photographed every kill site, and maintained detailed records of patterns and timings. Their data revealed something striking. The attacks moved through the region in a wave pattern, starting in the north, progressing south over several months, then disappearing. The following year, the pattern repeated. Same route, same progression. The ranchers could almost predict which farms would be hit next based on the pattern from the previous year. Armed with this information, they set up concentrated defenses at predicted target locations. Multiple families watching together, armed patrols, floodlights, they were ready. And yet, when the attacks came, the creature avoided the defended farms and hit properties just outside the prediction zone, as if it knew, as if it had observed their preparations and adjusted its approach. That level of adaptability is extraordinary. It suggests either highly developed intelligence or some form of awareness that goes beyond typical predator cognition. The ranchers were forced to conclude that whatever they were dealing with could observe, assess, and modify its behavior in real time based on human countermeasures. The cooperative eventually disbanded, not because the attacks stopped, but because the cost of maintaining constant vigilance became unsustainable. Families couldn't afford to have members watching livestock every night indefinitely. They returned to hoping they wouldn't be targeted, accepting losses when they occurred, because fighting something they couldn't catch or kill proved impossible. Here's something most people don't consider: the psychological impact on farming communities, the stress of knowing your animals might be killed at any moment, the fear that keeps families awake at night, the paranoia that develops when you're dealing with an invisible threat. Some farmers have developed severe anxiety. Others have abandoned agriculture entirely, unable to cope with the uncertainty. Dr. Maria Santos, a psychologist who worked with affected communities in Puerto Rico, documented cases of PTSD among farmers who'd witnessed Chupacabra attacks. The symptoms were similar to those seen in combat veterans: hypervigilance, intrusive memories, severe stress responses. The trauma of seeing your animals butchered by something you can't understand or fight against has lasting psychological effects. She also noted that children in these communities developed fear-based behaviors, refusing to go outside after dark, nightmares about creatures attacking their homes. The legend had become a source of genuine terror for a generation of rural youth. The Chupacabra wasn't just a cryptid story, it was a persistent threat that shaped how these communities lived. Now let's talk about the government response, or lack thereof. Most official investigations into Chupacabra attacks have been perfunctory at best. Authorities collect basic information, offer explanations involving known predators, and close the cases. There's been no coordinated effort to study the phenomenon scientifically, no allocation of resources to determine what's actually happening. Some researchers believe this is deliberate, that governments don't want to acknowledge something they can't explain or control. Admitting that an unknown creature is killing livestock across multiple countries would create panic and raise questions that officials can't answer. It's easier to dismiss the reports and let farmers deal with the problem privately. However, there are hints that some military and intelligence agencies have taken interest. Unconfirmed reports suggest that Puerto Rican authorities sent tissue samples from early victims to laboratories in the United States for analysis. The results of those analyses were never made public. Similarly, there are claims that Mexican military units have been deployed to areas experiencing heavy Chupacabra activity, though official explanations attributed these deployments to drug interdiction operations. A former U.S. military officer who spoke on condition of anonymity claimed that special operations units conducted reconnaissance missions in southern Texas in the early 2000s. The stated purpose was monitoring border activity, but the officer alleged the actual mission was investigating reports of unusual creature sightings. According to this source, the teams found evidence of kills matching Chupacabra descriptions, but were ordered not to document their findings formally. These claims are impossible to verify. No official documents support them, but the pattern of unofficial interest combined with official dismissal is consistent across multiple countries. It suggests something is being monitored, even if it's not being publicly acknowledged. And let's return to the creatures themselves, because if multiple Chupacabras exist, that raises questions about breeding populations, territorial ranges, and ecological niches. A single creature moving across continents doesn't make biological sense. The sightings are too widespread, too simultaneous. There have been reports from Puerto Rico and Texas on the same night, from Mexico and Argentina within days of each other. Unless the creature can travel impossibly fast, there must be multiple individuals. But if there's a breeding population, where are they? Where do they live when they're not attacking livestock? Attempts to track Chupacabras after attacks have failed consistently. The creatures vanish. No lairs have been discovered. No dens or nesting sites. No juvenile specimens have been found. It's as if they appear from nowhere, kill, and disappear back into nothing. Some cryptozoologists have suggested they might be nocturnal and use cave systems for shelter. Latin America has extensive cave networks, many unexplored. The creatures could be living deep underground, emerging only to hunt. This would explain why they're so rarely seen, and why no nests have been found. Others propose they might be semi-aquatic, using rivers and water systems to travel and hide. Some attacks have occurred near water sources, and witnesses occasionally report seeing the creatures near rivers before they vanish. If they can move through underground waterways, that would explain the lack of tracks and the seeming ability to disappear instantly. These theories attempt to fit the Chupacabra into a framework we understand, treating it as an undiscovered but ultimately natural animal. The problem is that none of these explanations account for all the evidence: the technological interference, the seeming intelligence, the ability to avoid every trap and camera and trained hunter. Natural animals don't do these things consistently. Which brings us back to the alternative theories. The idea that the Chupacabra isn't natural. Let's explore that possibility more seriously. The genetic experiment theory has some basis in documented history. Various governments and private organizations have conducted animal modification research, creating hybrids, engineering traits. It's not impossible that something went wrong, or was deliberately released. An escaped experimental subject would exhibit unusual characteristics. It might not fit into natural taxonomies because it wasn't created through natural processes. If the Chupacabra is engineered, certain features make more sense. The apparent intelligence could be enhanced cognition. The unusual physical appearance could be the result of genetic manipulation, combining traits from multiple species. The ability to evade detection could be deliberately designed behavior, an organism created for specific purposes that now exists outside its intended environment. The counter-argument is that no credible evidence of such a program exists. No facilities have been identified. No researchers have come forward. The logistics of creating, containing, and then losing track of multiple specimens across different countries seems implausible. Yet the possibility remains because the creature's characteristics are so anomalous. The extraterrestrial theory faces even higher skepticism. But let's examine it objectively. Witnesses describe features that appear in alleged alien encounter reports: large eyes, gray skin, thin bodies. The creatures move in ways that seem to defy physics. They avoid human technology effortlessly. Some attacks coincide with UFO sightings in the same general area. If the Chupacabra is extraterrestrial in origin, it could be either an alien life form itself or an engineered organism created by non-human intelligence. Perhaps it's a biological probe, something designed to study Earth's ecosystem or collect genetic material. The blood drainage could be sample collection rather than feeding. This theory explains why the creature doesn't fit into Earth biology, why it seems to have capabilities beyond known animals, why official agencies might be interested, but keeping their investigations classified. If there's even a possibility of non-human intelligence being involved, that would be handled at the highest levels of government secrecy. I'm not advocating for any particular theory. I'm laying out the possibilities because after 30 years of incidents, we still don't have definitive answers. Something is killing livestock in a very specific way across multiple countries. Witnesses are seeing something that doesn't match known animals. Physical evidence exists but doesn't point to any clear conclusion. We're left with questions and competing theories, none fully satisfactory. What we do know for certain is that the phenomenon is real. The deaths are real. The fear is real. The economic impact is real. Whether the Chupacabra is animal, experiment, or something else, it exists in some form. Its effects are measurable and documented. Recent cases continue to follow the established pattern. 2023 saw reports from Ecuador, Costa Rica, and the Dominican Republic. 2024 had incidents in Honduras and El Salvador. As of this year, farmers in Panama and Colombia have reported losses consistent with Chupacabra attacks. The creature or creatures remain active. The mystery deepens. Some researchers believe we're approaching a tipping point. That enough data has been collected that a breakthrough might be possible. Dr. Ruiz is working on a comprehensive database of all documented cases, creating a system that tracks patterns, timings, and environmental factors. She hopes this might reveal something that individual cases don't show. A larger pattern that explains the creature's behavior and possibly its nature. Other researchers are taking different approaches. Some are using advanced camera systems with multiple spectrum imaging, trying to capture definitive footage. Others are analyzing the biophysics of the blood drainage mechanism, hoping to understand how it works. Still others are examining folklore and historical records, looking for earlier references that might shed light on the creature's origins. The truth is probably still years away, maybe decades. Maybe we'll never fully understand what the Chupacabra is, but the search continues because the attacks continue, because farmers need answers, because something is out there that shouldn't be, and ignoring it won't make it disappear. In the small towns and rural farms where this is a daily reality, the Chupacabra isn't a legend or a story. It's a threat, a predator that comes in the night, something that takes their livelihood and leaves them with questions that have no answers. They've learned to live with it as best they can, accepting losses, protecting what they can, sharing warnings with their neighbors. The Chupacabra has become part of the landscape in these places, as real as coyotes and mountain lions. More dangerous because it can't be hunted or deterred. It's woven into the fabric of rural life in affected regions. Parents warn children not to go near the livestock pens after dark. Farmers check their animals with a mixture of hope and dread each morning. Communities bond over shared experiences of loss and fear, and every so often, someone sees it, gets a glimpse of the thing that's been taking their animals. The descriptions remain consistent: gray skin, large eyes, thin body, moving in ways that seem wrong, and they understand that this is real, that the stories aren't exaggerated, that something genuinely unknown is living alongside them. The Chupacabra phenomenon represents one of the most persistent cryptozoological mysteries of our time. Nearly 30 years of documented incidents, hundreds of witnesses, thousands of dead animals, physical evidence that defies conventional explanation, and still no definitive answers. Perhaps that's the real lesson here, that there are still mysteries in our world, still things we don't understand. The modern age of science and technology hasn't explained everything. Nature, or whatever this is, can still surprise us, can still present us with puzzles that resist solution. The Chupacabra is still out there, in the darkness of rural Latin America, in the borderlands of the American Southwest. Somewhere tonight, it might be stalking through a farm, approaching livestock with predatory intelligence, selecting its victim, striking with surgical precision, draining the blood and vanishing before dawn. Farmers will wake tomorrow to find their animals dead. They'll see the familiar puncture wounds, the bloodless corpses. They'll know what did it, even if they can't explain what it is. They'll bury their losses and hope it doesn't come back, but it probably will, because it always does. The mystery endures. The killings continue, and somewhere in the night, the Chupacabra moves through shadows, defying explanation, resisting capture, remaining one of the most disturbing unsolved mysteries of the modern world. Whatever it is, wherever it came from, it's still out there, still hunting, still unknown, and that's the truth we're left with. Not answers, but an ongoing mystery. Not solutions, but deeper questions. The Chupacabra isn't a solved case. It's an active phenomenon that continues to challenge everything we think we know about the natural world. Until someone captures definitive proof or the attacks finally stop, we're left with uncertainty, with stories and evidence that point towards something real but unexplained. The goatsucker remains in the shadows, still killing, still eluding us, and maybe, in some dark way, that's exactly where it wants to be. But there's one more case worth examining, one that ties together many of the elements we've discussed and adds a disturbing new dimension to the mystery. It happened just last year, 2024, a research station in the Darien Gap between Panama and Colombia. This wasn't a farm. It was a remote biological field station run by an international conservation organization. Scientists studying wildlife in one of the most isolated regions on Earth. And the station had been operating for 5 years without incident. Then, in August of last year, something changed. The researchers started finding animals dead, not wild animals. The specimens they'd been tracking for their studies, small mammals fitted with radio collars, birds with identification tags, all found with the characteristic puncture wounds, all drained. What made this case unusual was the victims. These weren't livestock. They were research subjects scattered across a wide area. The creature was actively hunting down animals that were being monitored, as if it knew which ones were important, as if it was targeting the study itself. Dr. James Morrison, the lead researcher, documented everything. He set up camera traps throughout the area, deployed motion sensors, created a grid of surveillance that should have captured anything moving through the zone. Night after night, animals died. The cameras recorded nothing. The sensors failed to trigger. Equipment that had functioned perfectly for years suddenly became unreliable, only during the hours when the attacks occurred. Morrison sent samples from the wounds to laboratories in 3 different countries. Independent analysis. The results were identical across all 3 labs. The tissue showed signs of exposure to an unknown enzymatic compound, something that prevented coagulation but also seemed to accelerate blood flow. The enzyme broke down so quickly that by the time samples samples reached the laboratories. Only trace markers remained. No one could identify it or determine its origin. The research team started experiencing other problems: electronic devices draining overnight, compasses spinning erratically, radio communications becoming unreliable. These effects intensified on nights when animals died. The correlation was unmistakable. Whatever was killing their research subjects was also affecting their equipment. 3 members of the team claimed they saw the creature. Separate sightings over 2 weeks. Their descriptions matched each other and matched the historical accounts from other regions. Gray skin, large eyes, thin bipedal body, but they added details that earlier reports hadn't emphasized. The creature moved with a fluidity that seemed impossible. Joints bending in ways that mammalian anatomy shouldn't allow. And it made no sound. Not footsteps, not breathing. Complete silence despite moving through dense jungle. On the final night before the team evacuated, Morrison himself encountered it. He was checking equipment around 2 a.m. when his flashlight caught something 20 meters away. He froze. The creature was crouched over a dead peccary, one of the larger mammals they'd been studying. It turned its head toward him. Morrison described the moment in his report. The eyes reflected his light, but they also seemed to generate their own faint luminescence, a dull red glow that pulsed slightly. The creature held his gaze for what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds. Then it released the peccary and moved. Morrison said it didn't walk away. It sort of flowed. One moment crouched, the next moment disappearing into the vegetation so quickly he couldn't track the movement. When he examined the peccary, it was still warm. The puncture wounds were fresh. Blood had only just stopped flowing. Whatever that thing was, he'd interrupted it mid-feeding. And it had chosen to leave rather than confront him. That decision interested Morrison. It suggested the creature wasn't aggressive toward humans, that it actively avoided conflict, despite being capable of killing a 40-pound peccary. The research station was abandoned 3 days later. The organization deemed it too dangerous to continue operations. Morrison's final report included a recommendation that the area be studied by a different type of research team, one equipped to investigate cryptozoological phenomena rather than conventional wildlife. That recommendation was noted but not acted upon. The station remains empty, equipment still in place, slowly being reclaimed by the jungle. What makes this case significant is the documentation. Morrison kept detailed records, time-stamped observations, laboratory analysis from multiple independent sources, video footage showing equipment malfunctions. He built a case file that's harder to dismiss than typical Chupacabra reports. The scientific community hasn't embraced his conclusions, but they also haven't been able to explain his evidence using conventional means. This case also raises questions about the creature's range. The Darien Gap is one of Earth's most remote regions. Dense jungle, difficult terrain, limited human presence. If Chupacabras are operating there, they might be present in many other isolated areas where their activities go unnoticed because there's no livestock to kill. They might be primarily wild hunters who only come into conflict with humans when they encounter domesticated animals. That possibility transforms the phenomenon. It's not a creature targeting human agriculture. It's a predator with specific feeding requirements that occasionally intersects with human activity. The attacks on livestock might be opportunistic rather than deliberate, easy targets in an environment where wild prey has become scarce. If that's true, it raises another disturbing possibility. The Chupacabra might not be rare. There might be significant populations living in remote areas of Central and South America where human observation is minimal. The attacks we know about might represent only a tiny fraction of their actual hunting activity. Most of their kills happening in wilderness areas where no one finds the evidence or connects the deaths to the legend. Several cryptozoologists are now advocating for expeditions into remote regions to search for evidence of Chupacabra populations, not waiting for attacks to happen near human settlements, but actively looking in areas where the creatures might live naturally. extensive cave systems in Central America, the deep jungles of the Amazon basin, mountain regions in the Andes where few people venture. These could all harbor populations that we've never detected because we weren't looking in the right places. The challenge is funding and resources. Expeditions into truly remote areas are expensive and dangerous. The Darien Gap expedition cost Morrison's organization over $200,000 and resulted in abandoned equipment when they pulled out. Most cryptozoological researchers work on minimal budgets. They can't afford the kind of comprehensive exploration that might yield definitive evidence. But technology is improving. Drone surveillance, satellite imaging, camera traps with extended battery life, and better night vision. These tools are becoming more accessible and more capable. Within the next decade, we might have the ability to monitor vast areas that were previously impossible to observe. If chupacabras exist in those areas, we'll find them, or they'll find us, because one troubling trend in recent reports is the gradual movement toward more populated areas. Early attacks happened in rural farming communities. Recent incidents are occurring closer to towns and cities. The creature or creatures seem to be adapting to human proximity, learning that populated areas offer abundant food sources, becoming bolder. 2023 saw a sighting in suburban Monterrey, Mexico, a city of over 5 million people. The witness was walking her dog at night when she saw something in an empty lot. She described it as matching the chupacabra appearance, but larger than most reports. Perhaps 5 feet tall, it watched her for several seconds before moving away into shadows. No attack occurred, but the sighting was significant because it happened in an urban environment, far from the rural settings where chupacabras are typically reported. If the creatures are moving into cities, that changes the dynamic completely. More witnesses, more cameras, more potential for documentation, but also more danger. Urban environments mean more people at risk, more potential for encounters. The creature that was content attacking isolated livestock might behave differently when surrounded by millions of humans. Authorities in several Mexican cities have quietly increased nighttime patrols in areas where livestock is kept within city limits. These patrols aren't publicly acknowledged as chupacabra responses. They're officially described as crime prevention or animal control initiatives. But the timing and locations correspond exactly to areas where sightings have been reported. Someone is taking the threat seriously, even if they won't admit it publicly. The final question we need to ask is, what happens if someone does capture definitive proof? What if tomorrow a farmer shoots a chupacabra and the body is recovered intact? What if a researcher gets clear video footage that can't be dismissed? What if physical evidence emerges that proves beyond doubt that these creatures exist? The scientific implications would be enormous. A new species of predator with unusual hunting behaviors and apparently sophisticated intelligence. Biology textbooks would need revision. Our understanding of South American fauna would require updating. The discovery would rank among the most significant zoological finds in modern history. But the practical implications might be even more significant. If chupacabras are real, they're killing livestock and potentially pose risks to humans. They'd need to be managed, protected perhaps as an endangered species, but also controlled to prevent conflicts with agriculture and human safety. The same debates that surround wolves, bears, and mountain lions would apply. How do we coexist with a predator that threatens our interests? And what if the alternative theories prove correct? What if evidence emerges suggesting genetic engineering or extraterrestrial origin? That would raise questions far beyond cryptozoology, questions about who created them and why. Questions about what else might be out there that we don't know about. Questions that would challenge fundamental assumptions about our world and our place in it. For now, we're left with the mystery, with farmers who know something is killing their animals, with witnesses who've seen things they can't explain, with researchers gathering evidence that doesn't quite fit into any existing framework. The Chupacabra remains elusive, remains undefined, remains one of the most fascinating and frustrating mysteries of our time. Whether it's an undiscovered animal, a genetic experiment, an extraterrestrial visitor, or something else entirely, it's real enough to the people who've lost livestock, real enough to the witnesses who've seen it, real enough to warrant serious investigation rather than dismissal. The truth, whatever it turns out to be, is out there waiting to be discovered, and until we find it, the mystery continues. And there you have it. If you enjoy our content, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. It means a lot. Thank you, and safe travels, my dear friends.